Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Chris McDaniel's America. Of course, Chris is not with us this week. We hope to have him back next week. Unexpected development for Chris this week, but we do hope to have him back. But of course, as always, I'm Jack Fairchilds, but I am joined by my good friend Jim Sigelski, filling in yet again for Chris this week.
Thanks for having me, Jack, and I'm glad I got the dress code, so we dress exactly alike.
Look, I mean, it's striped and everything, the right color scheme. No dinosaur on your shirt this week. No. I'm a little disappointed by that. I like the dinosaur you had last week.
I'll bring it back.
It's been an interesting week. I mean, you've seen all kinds of crazy things that are happening in the world. I'm never amazed anymore by the amount of negativity that's thrown at Donald Trump these days. It just seems to be consistent. But one thing I didn't have on my bingo card, and I'm pretty sure that you didn't have on yours, is Michelle Obama saying something I agreed with. No.
Wouldn't think it was possible.
No. I mean, now, in this same apparently she has a podcast. I didn't know she had a podcast. From what I've read, it seems like not many people did anyway, because it doesn't read like it's doing very well. But in this podcast, I'm sure if you go through it, matter of fact, I know because in the same podcast, I reported on the right side something else she said during this podcast I vehemently disagree with, but that's beside the point. She did say something that I agree with, and I think most people will. She said that when she was growing up, she was very grateful for the things that her parents did for her, for the things that she received. But kids today are less grateful than they were in her time. And I agree with that. And again, not all kids. There's some kids out there who are extremely grateful for what they get. But most kids, at least in my observation, Jim, I don't have any kids. But my observation of other people's kids and being around youth sports as much as I am, kids nowadays, there's a sense of entitlement that I don't think was there when I was a kid. I don't remember feeling like my parents owed me. Now, I'm sure there were times where I acted like a spoiled brat. I'm not saying that I was this great kid, because no, there were times I definitely tested my parents. But I understood that things weren't guaranteed for us. If I acted a certain way in the department store, that Star Wars toy that I was begging for was going back on the shelf. I understood that there were consequences for my actions. But you see it on social media. You see videos all the time of kids that are acting up, complaining about not getting something they want, and then the parent, instead of doing the right thing and holding firm, gives them what they want. So there is something to what Michelle Obama is saying here. But the next question, and this is where you have to dig a little bit deeper, is who's to blame for this? Why are kids less grateful than they were years ago? And I got to thinking about it, Jim, because again, Michelle Obama being the one that said it, I think is kind of ironic because it's her party. In many ways, in part, her husband's administration, they were the very ones that wanted to try to give away everything. You remember there was a point in time where we saw the participation trophy become a thing in sports. Youth sports, you've got these groups where, winning and losing doesn't matter as much. So we must give them a participation trophy because they participate. Doesn't matter they didn't win a single game. They get a trophy too. You take that a step further. In certain schools, they didn't want to give Fs anymore. They didn't want to fail anybody. Last time I checked, that's how you advance in school. You have to put forth the effort. You have to put forth the work in order to pass. They didn't like that because that might bring them down. It might stunt their growth. Whatever nonsense the left was pushing. And as a result, it has created a generation that does have a sense of entitlement. They don't feel like there's any consequences. A kid goes off, he racks up an extraordinary amount of college debt, taking out loan after loan, all while he majors in Game Boy.
Right.
With no possible career path. It's not the kids' fault, obviously. It's definitely not the guidance counselors who never thought to tell them that Game Boy was probably a terrible major. No, it's got to be someone else's fault. Someone else is to blame because you can't hold that kid back. So let's just wipe out his college debt. You heard that from Joe Biden the last couple of years. So again, when you examine, which someone, I agree with her. She's right that kids today are less grateful. But they're less grateful because of liberal policies that told them that they're entitled to things that they were never entitled to.
I agree with you, Jack. I mean, I don't know that it's all liberal versus conservative here because every generation has spoiled their children a little bit more than the last generation. And now we're to the point where we have a generation of kids that don't have a work ethic. They do think they deserve a participation trophy. I mean, look at the kids that were working at Google and these other places where they felt like they didn't even have to go to work anymore. Or if they went to work, they'd start their day, playing games in the game room. And it's out of control. But this is a generational thing. I'm a generation before you, Jack, and I can promise you, I didn't grow up spoiled. You said that, when you were in the department store and you acted up, the toy got back on the shelf. When I was in the department store and acted up, I got my ass whooped. So,
well, I got that too.
And I think I'm definitely old school. I was raised old school. My mom's still alive and she's probably watching this podcast. But my dad, who is no longer with us, he was a threat constantly.
But in the right way.
Today, I guarantee you, they would say my father was a child abuser. There's no doubt about it. But what I always go back to, and I've written about this, is are we better off now that, corporal punishment's been done away with? Of course not.
No, and my dad, he had a paddle that he affectionately nicknamed the Board of Education because anytime he had to use it on one of us, he was trying to educate us. I hated that thing, but I can be honest with you. My dad, even though don't get me wrong, the spankings hurt, but they didn't hurt me long term. He wasn't beating me, but he was definitely making sure I understood I'd done something wrong. And I think that we've lost something in that. I do think that corporal punishment is the thing. I remember, I think I was in 6th grade, Jim. I might have been in 5th grade. But I think it was 6th grade was the year that teachers weren't, I think the first part of the year, teachers could paddle. And then the second part of the year, that kind of went away. It was one of those things, too, where I remember when it happened because most of us were like, oh, well, we don't have to worry about that anymore.
Right.
So instead of it being a positive for us, I think several kids realized, well, I can lash out a little bit more because you just take recess away from me. I don't have to worry about a paddling. And again, let's be clear. We're not in favor of child abuse, but I don't think that corporal punishment is that. I think that's another stretch that liberals have gone down.
I think what you and I are both in agreement with is there needs to be consequences for bad behavior.
Yes.
No matter what those consequences are, there has to be some sort of consequences for bad behavior. And today there's just not. I mean, look at what's going on across the country right now. People are basically going out and destroying people's cars, burning Tesla dealerships, setting fires. They're not being punished. There's just no consequences for bad behavior across the board anymore. So if that's going to be the case, then, a bad element's going to keep trying to push the limits of things, and they're getting away with it, at least under the old regime. Hopefully with Donald Trump coming on here and law enforcement getting beefed up and stuff, there's going to be more consequences, but there needs to be more consequences when a child is even small. That's when people need to start laying the ground rules. If you do it right when a child's small, you won't have a problem when they get older.
Yeah. Growing up, we weren't rich, but we weren't necessarily poor either. So, I think we were the definition of middle class. I think that's fair. But one of the things my father did for me that I still remember to this day, it wasn't, we had to earn things. It wasn't just given to us. Now, that doesn't count birthdays or Christmas gifts or things like that. But if I wanted something, okay, there's chores you can do. Get the money that way by doing chores. As I got older, my dad had a mobile home moving business. I was a young kid out there helping set up mobile homes and earning money in order to purchase things I want or do the things that I want to do. And that instilled in me the value of $1. Instead of just thinking, oh, it's always here. I can just run to mom and dad whenever I understood that, okay, you got to earn this. You got to work for this. Nowadays, that's not the thing. And again, I understand if you're better off than your parents were, you want to give your children a life that you didn't get as a child. I'm not talking about that. I'm fine with that. But you should at some point at least lay down the groundwork to make them understand, okay, this money isn't free. You've got to earn it. Because there are far too many kids out there that don't understand that. They're not learning that lesson. They're just handed things. And the worst offenders are the ones who watch their children throw these temper tantrums we're talking about, and then just instantly go reward them for it because you originally told them no. But because they threw such a fit, they made such a scene in said department store, instead of the beating you would have got, the lost toy and possible beating I got, that they get the toy.
How many people do you think now make their kids do chores at all? I mean,
Not
what
many.
percentage? I bet you it's less than 10% of the family. When I was growing up, especially during the summertime when we had off, we'd wake up to a list of chores that we possibly couldn't complete that day. And then the next day there was another list of chores. I don't know that kids have to ever lift a finger. And if they're lifting a finger, it's usually to play a video game or to lift up their iPhones nowadays. And I own a small business and I can see it with the people coming in who applying for jobs. If I hire a younger person, not all of them, listen, again, we'll say we can't categorize every single, I do have a couple of very good young people working for me, but overall, what I've noticed is a younger person doesn't, for the most part, have a work ethic anymore. They don't know what the value of work is. They were never taught it. And that starts when they're children. And if you're not taught that by your parents, like I wasn't given an allowance. You know what my parents' answer was if we asked for an allowance was, we feed you. Get out there and work. We had 7 acres to mow. We had all kinds of stuff. We had animals to feed. We had gardens to weed. That's how people used to grow up. And of course, I'm sure my dad had it even harder when he was growing up. And he was on the edge of being part of that greatest generation thing. And I think there's a reason those people were the greatest generation. It's the way they were raised. We're now on the point of raising the worst generation because we've taught them no usable values. And the most usable value, if a kid is, and this is great advice for a parent right now. You want your kid to be a success in today's world, you don't have to have them be a brain surgeon. You don't have to do anything except teach them how to work. If they have a work ethic, employers everywhere are going to value them like gold. Because they're competing against other kids, other young adults who don't know the value of work. So if you teach your kid the value of hard work, he will be employed for life.
Absolutely. And that's the thing here. You talked about owning a business. Before I started working for you, I worked at a bigger company. I saw the young people that you're talking about that came in, and it's going to sound terrible, but I had a rule. They had to make it 2 months before I'd learn their name, just because they left so quickly. And a lot of times you could pick out the ones, but he's not going to be here long, because you could see it. They weren't clicking anything that was told, anything that they were told they had to do. Any longtime employee that was trying to help them, not even a member of management that would come and tell them, look, you really need to do this, And they wouldn't listen to you because, again, they felt entitled. They felt like, look, I'm here, so they got to keep me on. It doesn't work that way in the real world. You will get fired if you're not productive. It happens time and time again. It's a sad reality for some of these kids to learn because they were never taught that. They were always taught there was no consequences. The kids nowadays, too, from the moment they're little, they are handed an iPhone. They're handed an iPad, a computer, a screen, as they call it. So that way, when they're at a restaurant or whatever, instead of them learning how to sit there and behave, they're being taught, just watch your shows. So the parents, instead of actually dealing with that stuff and trying to instill some of these things in, and look, I get it. I understand why. I'm not saying that if I were, again, I'm not a parent. I'm not saying if I wasn't a parent, I wouldn't use the same tools.
But Jack, you're right. These devices are being used as babysitters.
Mm-hmm.
It's wrong. It's not the way to raise your kid. These people are coming out here with no social experience. They don't know how to interact with people. I see it every day. And that's not the way to raise your child. And I guarantee you a good percentage of America is doing exactly that. And it is easy. Yeah. It's much easier to do it that way. But that's not parenting.
Yeah, it's not parenting. And it's one of those things that, again, you really need to question yourself and think about. I understand why you do it because, like Jim said, it's easy. I hand you the phone. I put on whatever cartoon or whatever show that you like, and Paw Patrol. Stick on Paw Patrol, and guess what? You're entertained, and you and your husband, you and your wife, y'all can sit down and you can have a relaxing dinner and not have to worry with the child. But at the same time, the child's just learning that, okay, I can't go anywhere without a screen.
Yep.
As they get older, and I've heard this from kids before, where they're saying to themselves before they ever go, well, why I can't go? I don't have my iPad's not charged. I don't have a screen. And it's, to me, that really sounds foreign to me because growing up, we couldn't take screens with us. When our parents wanted to go out, we just had to go out with them.
If you go out to dinner, go anywhere tonight, I guarantee if you look around the room, people aren't interacting with each other.
No. They're
all on their phone. They're all looking down at their phones.
The adults
sending text message. The adults, the children. It is it's something that's overtaken our society, and it can't be good for society.
Look, and I'll be honest, I'm guilty of it. I go out to eat with friends all the time, and I'm constantly, even during this show, I'll get a notification. I look down at it. It is a part of our habit. It is one of those things that we do unconsciously nowadays, where I'm sitting here and somebody's talking to me and I'm like, how much did I actually hear from them? How much did I actually retain of what they were telling me while I'm sitting here scrolling through Facebook, trying to see, what latest gossip, or in this case, a news alert that pops up. And don't get me wrong. I love the fact that we have a technology. Breaking news happens. We have it right there at our fingertips. But at the same time, sometimes we've got to unplug, and we darn sure need to have our kids unplug and not teaching them. One of the things, Jim, that we've seen is there's been a rise of diagnosed kids with attention deficit disorder. How much do you think these screens might be playing into that? The fact that they're not learning to pay attention to anything other than something they enjoy, like a cartoon or whatever they enjoy, that has to play a role in this, because to me, the fact that they're not sitting there like I had to. Look, I remember going out to eat with my parents, me getting bored and trying to act up, and it was, do we need to go to the bathroom? And that was like, no, sir. Instant straighten up once you heard that. And if you had pushed it far enough to where he didn't ask and you just had to go with him, you already knew you were in big trouble. Kids nowadays don't necessarily get that.
No,
because they just stare at a screen.
Here's the crazy thing. This is a recent news story that I saw. A school just banned phones from the school. And I'm looking at this story going, why were phones ever allowed in school? Why is who thought that was a good idea, is to allow students to have phones? And what can they possibly be learning in the schools if they all have their phones.
Yeah.
And I thought that was insane. I had no idea that there were schools that actually allowed cell phones in the classroom.
Most do.
But that's insane.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, their argument is if an emergency happens, they can call somebody. We went centuries without phones in the school.
Yeah.
There weren't that many emergencies. And that's a good way to raise a generation of dumb kids, because none of them are going to pay attention to the teacher.
No.
Anyway, if there's one thing that should happen, phones should not be allowed in schools.
Yeah, it's crazy to me. But the other thing, I guarantee you, the school that decided to kick phones out of their school, I guarantee you they got a lot of parental complaints.
Absolutely did. That was part of the story, actually. Parents complaining. And there's part of your problem. A parent complaining that their kid can't use their phone at school when the kids are supposed to be learning, that's probably someone that shouldn't be a parent in the first place.
Yeah. I mean, to me, it's so far, because you're 100% right. How did we get through it without them? How did we graduate high school without them? I didn't go to a 4-year school until a couple of years after I graduated high school. And by that time, cell phones had become more of the norm. All through high school, I think my dad had a cell phone in his car, and that was one of the only ones in the town. I was one of the only, but it was one of those old school phones that attached to the car. You weren't taking it out of the car with you. But we didn't have cell phones to walk around with. It wasn't a problem that teachers didn't have to face that problem because we didn't have it. It wasn't a problem for them. And once I got into college and cell phones started to become more common. Now, of course, they were smaller, more compact. But you could have it on your person in the classroom, but it better be turned off, because if your phone rang in one of those professors' classes, they were going to kick you out of the class. Plain and simple. No questions asked. They weren't going to take your phone from you, but they were going to tell you, okay, I told you no ringer. I saw a couple of kids get kicked out of class because they tried it, or they came in and forgot to turn off that ringer. Didn't matter if it was the best student in the class. You forgot, that professor kicked you out. If it happened more than once, they were kicking you out of the class. And that was hard lessons. I wonder if it's like that now. I wonder if the professors are as hardcore as they were about phones, or if they've softened on that too, because they understand this is a coddled generation and they maybe can't press them as hard as they once did. I don't know. I hadn't been in a college classroom, so I don't know how they handle that. But I know at the dawn of us all having a phone in our pocket, college professors would kick you out of a class just because they heard. And if they caught you on it, now, of course, back in those days, you weren't going to do much on a cell phone anyway, because they weren't mini computers the way they are now. There was very little you could do outside of texting people and stuff like that. But at the same time, I could understand why nobody wants you on it, because especially now, I'm giving a test. I'm a professor. I'm giving you a test, Jim. How am I going to trust that you're actually know what's on this test if I see your phone in your hand? You got the internet right there. You can look up the answers to my test. So of course I'm going to kick you out of the class. We have gotten so coddled as a society. Not just the kids. Again, this is all of us, because I mean, we have everything at our disposal whenever we want. You're a big Cardinals fan. I'm a huge Cubs fan. On our phone, on our iPads, wherever we go, we can take the game with us, which I do. I'll go out to eat and I've got the game sitting there on an iPad, sitting down, watching the game. Love doing that. If I want to go sit out on my back porch at night, enjoy a nice cigar or something, I can still set up a big TV out there if I want, but most of the time I just bring that iPad, set that out there and do whatever I want, watch whatever I want, sitting right there, enjoying. It's a nice convenience. And it's something that we should use more responsibly. Back to the kids and back to the point where we started, I don't view it as responsible when you use it as your babysitter. If you're using it for your own entertainment, that's fine. That's why we advanced technology. We didn't advance it so we can get kids to not be able to pay attention because we teach them when they're infants that the best thing to pay attention to is a screen. How can you as a parent compete with that screen? How can you as a parent, you as a teacher, an instructor, how can you compete with that screen? And at some point, if you're allowing your kids to see it, you have to put limits on it. I can understand technology's here. I can understand you letting them have technology, but there should be limits. At some point, you say, okay, you get 2 hours a day on it. Cut it off. Back in the day, Jim, I remember when video game consoles became big. I had the Atari. It grew into the Nintendo. But we didn't have 18 TVs in the house. So we probably were sharing a TV either with our siblings, in many households with your parents. So that meant if your parents wanted to watch something on TV and I wanted to play a video game, who do you think won out in the end?
Parents.
Exactly. Or my older brother, if it was he and I sharing a TV. There were certain times where it was understood, okay, I'm going to play the game I want to play. But I'd have to turn it off so that way my parents could watch what they wanted or my brother could watch what he wanted. And it was a smart way of doing it. Now, did I sometimes act like a spoiled brat when I was told I had to turn off Pac-Man or whatever it was I was playing? Sure. But at the same time, it was a life lesson. Kids nowadays, they have their own TV. They have their system set up there. Their parents, because, and again, and I'm not attacking you parents. I'll be honest, because I understand how easy it is. They've got the distraction. You can focus on the thing because you've got a lot of work. But being a parent is also a lot of work. You have to invest the time. And sometimes that means going to your kid's room and shutting off their technology and making them be social, even if it's just social with you. I remember growing up, we would go outside. We would run, play hide and seek, spotlight with flashlights. Whatever we could, we would be outside playing. Kids nowadays, no, they're on Fortnite. They're on Call of Duty. They're on whatever game they can. They're not as engaged. And everything's so easy to obtain. Of course, they're less grateful. Of course, they're going to feel a sense of entitlement because of these things. So you're right. It's not just the fault of the left, but the liberalism and this idea that you should be able to have whatever you want. The participate, it plays a part, but there's so many factors that play into why kids have a less grateful attitude than they did a few years ago. And I think you're right too. I do think my generation was probably less grateful than yours, but we've got to figure out a way to reverse the curve, because if it goes off the cliff, then how do we ever get kids to respect their parents again?
I honestly think it's already gone off the cliff. I think we have a generation right now, Jack, that wouldn't know what to do if we took away their tablets and their phones. I don't know that they could survive, honestly, if you think about it. If I told people that my first job, I had to, and this is true, I was a sales rep on the road, I had to pull over at a payphone to call my boss. And this would blow their minds. They would have no idea first of all, what a payphone is. Yeah. And the second thing is, what you had to do what? And that would be too much for them to handle. And I don't know how you reverse this, because I think it's only going to get worse. We got AI coming.
Yeah.
You talked about how easy it was to cheat when you had a phone in the classroom. Yeah. How easy is it going to be able to cheat with AI? They have Apple Watches now. You don't even need your phone. You can whisper a question into your wrist and the answer will pop up.
Yeah.
I don't know how we reverse this. I think we're on a real terrible course, and I think it's going to get worse before it gets better.
I think you're right, and I think, again, I remember, and I didn't have to do it but one time, but I remember years ago when I was a stringer reporter for one of the schools that I went to, didn't have an internet connection, and I had to call in and dictate the story I wrote, because that was back in the old school days, Jim, when it was, 7 days a week. So you had deadline that day. So you had to get them the story that night, or else it wasn't going to be in tomorrow's paper. So again, I had to call that in. Younger reporters now, they're never going to experience that because there's always a way to get it to people. It's one of those things that we do take for granted. And don't get me wrong, I'm grateful that I don't have to do that again.
Right. Yeah. No, listen, no one's knocking the convenience of some of these things. I think what our whole point of this episode, or at least the beginning of this episode, is the fact that if you want to be a parent, you want to raise an outstanding child, at least teach them a work ethic. And you can't do that if all they're doing is spending their entire day in front of a PlayStation, a tablet, a phone, and not interacting with anybody.
Yeah. And if they're playing sports, allow them to understand what losing is and that it's a possibility, that you're not always going to win. You don't always get a trophy just because you participated.
Right. How are you going to teach a kid how to be exceptional if you reward him for losing?
Yeah.
If you reward him for being bad at a sport.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe that's not a sport. Well, let him move on to something better. But you can't teach a work ethic if they don't practice hard and try to get better.
Yeah. I mean, you can encourage them while they struggle. That's a different thing. Encourage them. But don't tell them they're amazing when they're not. Help them become the best they can be. Don't tell them they're already there when they're not. You know they're not because you can see it. It's simple things like that, people. Jim, I think it's time, though, for us to pay a couple of bills and pause right here for a quick commercial break. We'll be right back.
Resort.
Welcome back here to Chris McDaniel's America. And again, rarely are we ever going to agree with Michelle Obama, but every now and then she hits something that's right. And we can admit when she's right. Now, of course, I'm sure that she'll point out other reasons why it's that way, and we'll come up with other ways to coddle them. But at the same time, it's an interesting discussion. It's worth discussing because I think that parents have, even these young parents nowadays, y'all have the best intentions. I'm not saying that you don't want to raise your kid well, but you can't fall into the traps of just giving them everything they want, of allowing technology to be your babysitter. You have to work at it, and sometimes you have to say no. I know it sucks. I know when your kid tells you they hate you, they wish you were dead, that stings more than your kid will ever understand. I get all of that. But that's part of being a parent sometimes. You have to be strong. You have to show them that strength, and you have to move on. I don't think we're going to solve that problem tonight, Jim. And I think it's time we can segue into something a little bit more light. And I think by light, we need to talk about the return of Kamala Harris and Tim Walz. These two comedians, and I'm sorry, that's what I'm going to refer to them as comedians, not politicians, because they make me laugh. Now, they're not intending to make me laugh. It's just we really dodged a bullet not electing Kamala Harris, Jim.
We sure did. I'm glad she's back talking too, because she makes me laugh also. And I think this last speech that she just gave, I guess last night, should remind everyone as to how lucky we are Donald Trump is our president.
Well, let's get into that because again, this was her first public address since losing the 2024 presidential election. And she says, "Please allow me, friends, to digress for a moment. Okay, it's kind of dark in here, but I'm going to ask for a show of hands. Who saw the video a couple of weeks ago? The one of the elephants at the San Diego Zoo during the earthquake. Google it if you've not seen it." So that scene has been on my mind. Everybody's been asking, what are you thinking about these days? For those of you who haven't seen it, here those elephants were, and as soon as they felt the earth shaking beneath their feet, they got in a circle and stood next to each other to protect the most vulnerable. Think about it. What a powerful metaphor. Because we know those who try to incite fear are the most effective when they divide and conquer. They separate the herd when they try to make everyone think they are alone. But the face of a crisis, the lesson is don't scatter. The instinct has to be immediately to find and connect with each other where we can be stronger in a circle. And of course, she continues by saying that, I guess she thinks everybody should be elephants, which is funny considering the fact she doesn't even understand the party that she runs against, the one that she attacks. What's their mascot, Jim?
It is the elephant.
Yeah.
I think the metaphor is actually correct, though, because here's the problem, though. Mm-hmm. They're not protecting the weak.
No.
The Democrats have circled around exactly like those elephants did at the zoo around an MS-13 gang member.
Yep.
That's who they're protecting. That's who they want. They're not protecting the Laken Rileys or the other the Rachel Moran or the Nungri girl who was raped and the 12-year-old who was raped and murdered. That's the weak and the vulnerable. Democrats don't want to protect those people at all. They want to protect criminal illegal aliens who commit horrific crimes and that they allowed in this country. And she in particular was supposedly the border czar and should take full responsibility for some of these horrific crimes, the murders, the deaths of young ladies, girls, and to use that metaphor that they're not, we need to round up and protect the weak. Mm-hmm. It should fall on it's laughable and should fall on deaf ears because that's not what Democrats do.
No, it's not what Democrats do. And when she talks about if we're divided, it's easy. That's true. Who is the group that constantly is trying to get us divided? Focus on our differences time and time. It's the Democrats. They've been doing it for years, the liberals. And that's been their path. That's been their strategy. Divide and conquer. Apparently, she's telling us their playbook, but is trying to use it against those who fought against her because their entire... Why do you really think that most Democrats give a damn about the transgender issue? No, they see a segmented group. They see another minority group that they can exploit. If they really cared about them, they'd tell the truth. It's a mental disorder and we need to get you psychiatric help. They don't do that. They tell you, live your truth. And they pretend that they are helping these people by allowing them to live in a delusion. Now, of course, I'm just using that as an example again, but that's another example because they don't care about the individual as much as they claim. They care about the collective. They want to divide us. That's why they're constantly coming up with a new subsect of groups. This group here, this group there. Today, it's illegal aliens that they want to protect. Tomorrow, who knows what it'll be? They'll come up with another subset. Today it's transgender. Tomorrow it's going to be pedophilia. They're going to continue to find another group to segment because that's what they do. So not only is it a statement that she's putting out, it's hypocritical because it's her party that's constantly hammering home the division. They'll never, in a million years, give Donald Trump credit for anything he does right. Anything he does, they'll jump on something, a mistake he makes, they'll jump on that in a heartbeat. But when he does something that's rocking and rolling, not only are they not going to admit it's right, they're going to fight against it like they are with these gang members that Trump wants to deport from the country. They're going to fight against it because that is what they do. They don't want us to unite. They want divide and conquer. And that's why her analogy falls flat. Now, of course, I'm sure I read it way better than she said it. I don't know if you've seen the video yet, but
you did. You actually did read it much better than she said it. And but I go back to what her analogy is supposed to mean. Her analogy is supposed to mean that Democrats are the party that protects the weak amongst us. What you just said about trans, letting men participate against girls in sports, is that protecting
It's not
the weak?
No.
The fact that they've opened up our borders and let violent criminals in, is that protecting the weak? No. The fact that they spend our money and cause inflation to hurt working and poor families, is that protecting the weak? Nothing they do protects the weak. And I think it drives them crazy right now that Donald Trump has taken over the mantle of the working class. That was always a Democrat position. Yeah. They were at one time, at least perceived. It might not have been true, but they were perceived to be the protectors of the weak, the downtrodden, the working class in this country. They no longer are perceived that way. And they shouldn't be perceived that way. As a matter of fact, they hate all Americans. As far as I can tell, they hate everyone. They love foreigners. They love Ukraine. They love illegal aliens. They hate Americans.
The last Republican president before Trump to rally the working class behind him was Ronald Reagan. Since that, it hadn't been there. They've sided more with the Democrats for whatever reason, because the Democrats, I think, sell them on a lie that they're actually there for them. But that's beside the point. That's the truth. We hadn't had a Republican tap into the working class the way that Trump has since Reagan. And the hope is that they're starting to see through the lies of the Democrat Party. They're starting to understand that this is a party that would rather work with segmented groups than actually try to figure out any messaging that unites us. The fact that they're still doubling down on the crazy, the fact that the AOCs of the world are considered front runners for the Democrat nomination in 4 years is just insane when you think about it. I mean, it's even crazier because, again, as I mentioned, Harris is back, but so was her drinking buddy, Tim Walz. It's Tim Walz, again, I was so wrong on Tim. Now, don't get me wrong. I was never wrong about him politically. I knew he was an insane socialist. But I thought he was going to bring this Midwestern charm. I thought he was going to be an X factor for her on the campaign. He turned out to be a liability.
Oh, yeah.
And I didn't think it was possible for anyone to be a liability when Kamala Harris is your candidate. I thought she was already liability enough, and anyone else, a cadaver, could have brought upside compared to her. Not Tim. Tampon Tim came on the scene, and he made a point to make sure he drug her down. I'll never forget the first interview that they had where Tim, I thought he was there to help.
Yeah, I thought he was her wingman. Turned out he wasn't.
He sat there and said nothing.
Yeah.
I mean, it was like, why is he here? Well, and then, of course, the disastrous debate, which was probably second only to the Joe Biden-Trump debate in worst debate performances I've seen. Because he was just
clobbered by J.D. Vance. Yeah. Clobbered.
Yeah. J.D. Vance became a star that day, but also Tim Walz, Tim Harris. I try to merge the two of them because they remind me of each other now. Tim Walz was exposed as not ready for prime time in the slightest. Well, he continues that because he said that he was picked to be the running mate with Kamala Harris because he could code talk to white guys watching football and fixing their trucks.
Jack, let me ask you, how well did that work out for them in the election?
I don't think it was very well.
They just won over the white male vote. Is that what happened when Tim Walz took over?
No. I mean, the numbers don't show that, so I don't think that helped.
I'm not sure Tim Walz didn't scare off more males than he bought in. I mean, it's kind of crazy that they would pick a tampon Tim to bring in the male vote. Look, a man who literally put tampons in the boys' bathrooms is who they bought in to win the male vote.
But he goes hunting, Jim. He goes hunting.
I think he pretends.
He was a football coach, Jim. He might pretended that too.
Yeah.
Look, I'm sure Tim Walz is a nice guy.
I'm not so sure he is, honestly.
Look, I'll give him the benefit of the doubt for today. We'll say he was a nice guy, but he wasn't ready for prime time, and politically, he couldn't be more wrong. His politics were absolutely terrible. So if this was the reasoning behind his selection, which was questioned time and time again, it was idiotic. Now, it wasn't the reasoning for his selection. The reasoning was they were hoping that his Midwestern charm that they had thought that he had would offset the fact that they didn't pick Shapiro out of Pennsylvania because they're anti-Semitic. They wanted to try to offset that with somebody they thought could come across as likable. And like I said, when he first came on the scene and the first couple of times I heard him speak, I remember talking with you and telling you, oh no, this guy might be dangerous because he comes across likable. Crazy, but likable.
Don't you think Shapiro, in the end, is very happy he did not get selected for that position? And
I think so.
Escape that sinking ship that was going down no matter who they selected. They could have picked Shapiro. They still would have got trounced. And Shapiro would have to deal with all that crap he had on his sleeve after the election. So I think if there's somebody that's come out of this quite well, it is Shapiro out of Pennsylvania. And based on what they have in the bullpen here with AOC and Bernie Sanders seem to be teaming up to make a run. I think Shapiro might end up being the man. And he is the best they have. Yeah. I mean, I disagree with him on lots of policies, but he's the best the Democrats have at this point.
For the longest point, people thought it was going to be Gavin Newsom in California. But California is such a train wreck of a state right now. And based on Gavin Newsom's own debate performance against Ron DeSantis is not a stellar debater. I like Ron DeSantis. I think on policy he's a good governor. But I'd never seen him on a debate stage where I was impressed. Doesn't mean I wouldn't vote for him. Jim knows this. He gives me a hard time. I'm a very tough critic on debates, especially on candidates I like. I'm very tough on them. Some people, oh no, that was fine. Me, I'll find something to nitpick just because I think I've worked on too many campaigns. That was part of my job, nitpick. But he wiped the floor with Gavin Newsom, who I never thought he would because Gavin Newsom, despite the fact he's wrong, he's young, he's polished, he's an attractive man that they can put up on the screen and he'll look good. And that works a lot of times in these debates. But in this particular one, Newsom was ill-prepared. He just came across terrible. And I think after that, to the same thing I said about Walz, he was exposed as a not ready for primetime player.
Yeah, also, in Gavin Newsom's defense, just for his debate performance, he had nothing to work with. When all the residents of your state are fleeing to the state of the guy that you're actually debating, it's hard to win that debate.
Is that really a defense, or is that just proving why he should have never entered into it?
It's proving why he's a terrible candidate. And I'm not, but in that debate, it's really hard to win a debate when your state's such a disaster, and now you're debating the guy who basically has one of the most successful states in the union, and your residents are busy fleeing to his state. It's hard to win that debate. But I agree with you. I think Gavin Newsom has kind of eliminated himself from the running. I think what you have here is you're going to have the AOC Bernie Sanders coalition up against either Gretchen Whitmer or Shapiro out of Pennsylvania. And listen, I think Whitmer might be killing herself because she keeps appearing with Donald Trump. And, anybody who's even in the same state as Donald Trump is the enemy of the left.
Yeah, that's interesting, too, because, Whitmer has been seen with Trump. Yet now, of course, because she decides that, despite the fact that I'm appearing with him, she said that there's a constitutional crisis. She's attacking Trump because apparently too many people have seen
She
her
has
with it.
to. If she wants to run for president, she has to attack Trump.
She was on a again podcast. There are so many of those out there. There's only a couple worth. This one and the Right Side Radio. Outside of that, you don't have to pay attention to any of the others. This one's called Pod Save America, that is hosted by a former Barack Obama speechwriter. So that tells you that pod has no interest in saving America.
Guarantee you that one's not worth watching.
Yeah, it's basically false advertisement because they don't want to. They want to save America.
No.
They want to fundamentally change America.
Yes.
During it, the host asked Whitmer if we were in a constitutional crisis, and she said, "We are. I think that no one is above the law. The thought that we've got an administration that is just blatantly violating court orders should, I think, scare everybody. This is a very serious moment." So she's okay enough with Trump to stand on a stage with him, especially when Trump's probably helping her state out or doing something. But second she goes on a liberal podcast, it's time to attack.
I actually think Trump kind of played Whitmer a little bit. I don't know if you noticed this, but when Trump was getting off his plane, she went in for the handshake, and Trump basically just grabbed her and gave her a big hug. This was a week after she was in the White House holding her folder up in front of her face because she didn't want people to know that she was in the Oval Office with Donald Trump. And so he goes in for the hug. And so I think Trump's kind of trolling her and playing her. And she's in a tough spot because Trump's doing a whole lot for auto manufacturers in Michigan, and she can't push those people away and run for president, but she also can't get too close to Trump and run for president as a Democrat. So she's in a tight spot. She might emerge, but back to my original theory, I think it's either between her, Shapiro, or the socialist part of that party, and that would be AOC, Bernie Sanders.
Or if they figure out a miracle way to resurrect the corpse of Gavin Newsom, because he's their ideal.
Yeah,
pick.
I mean, 3 years is a long time.
Yeah.
A lot can happen between then and now, but anybody who would vote for Gavin Newsom would have to be brain dead, knowing what he's done to the state of California.
Yeah, I don't see Gavin Newsom as the serious threat I thought he was a year or two ago.
He's a sleazeball, comes across as a sleazeball, and that appeals to a lot of people that just love regular politicians. And I'm always amazed, Jack, how many people in this country love the traditional politician.
Yeah.
They love somebody that's going to lie to them. And it's part of the reason they hate Donald Trump so much. The man just tells them what he's going to do and then does it.
It makes no sense how much they love the sleazeball politician. We've seen it time and time again where we've had good politicians who tell the truth to you, and they don't move forward because, well, I've always voted for this one. I'm always been there for that guy. Even though we can point to a record, we're not doing anything. We're not saying anything that's untrue. We're pointing to their actual record in office and get accused of negative campaigning. Their record should always be fair game.
Right.
How else do you beat an incumbent if you're not allowed to point out their record? But yet they can send out mailer after mailer attacking your guy, and it's perfectly okay. Oh my goodness. Did you know that about that person? Goodness, I can't vote for him because I got a mailer from the incumbent telling me how terrible they were. And it's so frustrating, and that's sadly part of the game. Now, of course, this week wasn't just the return of Kamala Harris and Tim Walz, but we also found out when we can see the first post-White House interview of Joe and Jill Biden.
I did not know that.
They're going, look, they're brave. They're brave because they're going on a hard-hitting, tough show, one that is going to ask them all the tough questions. They're not going to coddle. Funny, we talk about coddling again after the first segment. They're not going to coddle Joe Biden at all. He's going on the very difficult The View.
Oh, wow. Well, I should have guessed it was The View. But, the funny thing is, I wouldn't doubt if he actually does get some hard questions this time around, because they don't need Joe Biden anymore. They were just using Joe Biden to begin with. So, there might be somebody ballsy enough to ask him a tough question on The View, because he's unimportant to them anymore.
Wow. It's to me, it just speaks volumes, because again, where else can he go that that he won't get exposed for how much further he slipped since he left? Because he has.
Why are they doing this, by the way? I mean, why is Jill making Joe get in front of cameras again? It was bad enough when she did it when he was president, but why are they doing this?
Well, according to Whoopi, it's so that they can ask about his legacy, accomplishments, regrets, and of course, the current political landscape.
It's going to be a short show if it's about his accomplishments.
It's, again, The View is not a credible show. He might as well just gone on the Jimmy Kimmel show. I mean, it's the same type show. It's ridiculous anti-Trump nonsense. And again, these aren't journalists that he's going to sit down and talk with. He's not going to give a journalism show, even a liberal-leaning one. He's not going on one of those because he knows he might actually get asked a more difficult question. He's going to go on The View because he knows Joy Behar is an idiot. So what's she going to ask that's too tough? Whoopi Goldberg is a Kool-Aid drinking true believer. So she's going to coddle Joe Biden the best she can. Jill's there too. So that way when he has his Joe Biden moment, Jill can step in, and
I wouldn't even doubt if this is one of those interviews where the questions are already pre-planned.
Oh, without
and the answers are already pre-planned. And honestly, I don't see the point of this interview at all. I wouldn't watch it. I wouldn't care what was asked. I wouldn't care what was said. Joe Biden is going to go down in history as the very worst president the country has ever had. And you could say that about a bunch of stuff that he did, but if you just take the border alone, it would make him the worst president in the history of the country. And that's going to be his legacy.
Now, Jim, I know for a fact you've already set your DVR for May 8th. You're not missing this episode of The View. I know this is the must-watch show of the season.
It's the first I'm hearing about it, Jack, honestly. I didn't know. I'd stopped following Joe as soon as he got out of office, and I've been celebrating every day since he's been out of office.
As a columnist and a political commentator, you can't tell me there's not a part of you that's a little curious. Now, I was talking with the editorial staff when I saw this and told them about it, and they're like, "Oh, you're gonna watch it?" I said, "No, I'm gonna find the cliff notes because I'm probably gonna have to cover it at some point." But no, I'm not gonna sit down and watch The View.
I know the best places to go to watch the best clips from The View and all the other liberal whack job shows that are out there. I can't sit there and watch them myself because they just make me insane that people can be this stupid.
Yeah.
So I watch the shows that make fun of them.
That's what I do for the most part. Or when Fox News puts a clip out on their website showing this terrible interview and what a train wreck it is. Because, I don't think it's going to be a train wreck interview, because I think anytime Joe Biden looks like he's struggling, that's why Jill's there. That's why Jill's there, because Jill's going to jump in. She's probably going to field the majority of the questions. And if Joe's having a good day, then maybe Joe answers a few more than was anticipated. But it's going to be the Jill Biden show. She's going to be the one front and center. And I can tell you why the Bidens are doing this. They want to try to give him a better legacy. They want to try to save face after he was forced off the ballot. I don't think they're going to go on scorched earth and be bitter like they probably want to, but they are going to go on and overinflate his accomplishments. They're going to go on and point to things that you and I are going to know are untrue and say, this is what we accomplished. This is what we did. They're going to ignore how bad things were when he left. They're going to ignore how crazy the prices are. They're going to attack Trump on the tariffs. They're going to attack Trump on deportations and ignoring the fact that he's trying to kick gang members out of the country.
Wouldn't that be funny if that's what they did? If they attack Trump on deportations when they're the ones that made the deportations necessary. Wouldn't that be ironic and interesting?
And right on point for them.
I'll tell you what I did watch, and everyone should go back and watch it if they didn't. President Trump had a cabinet meeting this week, televised. Every cabinet leader spoke at that cabinet meeting and gave an update on what they'd accomplished and what they're working on. That is real important. That's something no president has ever done before, open up their cabinet meetings to cameras. And that's what people should be watching, not Joe Biden. And you will learn during that cabinet meeting just the horrific stuff that Joe Biden did do. I mean, Robert Kennedy Jr. basically said that Joe Biden was leading a child trafficking ring while he was in office. And he was. They lost 300,000 children during that thing who are probably into either sexual slavery or just slavery. And that should be the biggest news story there is. And that's the reason this is the worst president in the history of our country. I mean, he should be arrested for treason, arrested for crimes.
But then again, he wasn't really making the decisions. I mean,
I don't disagree with that. They should get down to the bottom of who was making decisions, who was working the auto pen. Let's figure this out. Now, another good thing I found out today was Tulsi Gabbard is nailing down Anthony Fauci for lying to Congress. And I think that's going to be a bigger thing. Now, what's going to happen there is they have to decide what can they do to him, because Joe Biden pardoned him for crimes he hadn't been charged with yet.
That still blows my mind that you can be pardoned for something that hasn't, in a charge that hasn't been issued.
I think it's going to go to the Supreme Court.
It's going to be interesting.
I think it's going to be another one of those that go to the Supreme Court. But
which means it's 50-50 how they'll rule.
Here's a man who, according to Tulsi Gabbard, lied before Congress about funding the lab in Wuhan that released the COVID virus. Lied to Rand Paul's face under oath. He should be held accountable. He should be held accountable for the deaths of millions of people. And this is at least... we have a president and an administration that's going to go after these things now and expose them, because we were taken advantage of so bad the last 4 years. And
it's true. It's true.
Let's hopefully we get to the bottom of them and hold people accountable so it never happens again.
I hope you're right, Jim. Of course, I think we're coming up on the end of the show. I appreciate you for being here and, again, sharing that about the cat, because I hadn't seen him yet. So I'm glad that you saw him and shared the latest information there. Guys, this has been Chris McDaniel's America. Chris, again, hopes to be back next week. Apologies that he's not here with us this week, but he hopes to be back with us next week. It's baseball season, and his son is in the state playoffs, so we just have to bear with it for a little while because his schedule is that much more limited at the moment. But this has been Chris McDaniel's America here on the Midnight Ride Network, your home for the anti-establishment movement.
Looks like you've been sleeping well.
Megan, he's back. The My Pillow guy.
And you're looking good.
Still feeling good.
Well, just when you thought it couldn't get any better, we've got the best pillow ever, My Pillow 2.0.
Wow, it's so soft and smooth.
It's cool to the touch. How did you do that?
Well, we took My Pillow's patented fill and combined it with this new technology that we didn't have back then when I invented My Pillow to bring you the best pillow in history, My Pillow 2.0. Just like all of you, I never imagined that My Pillow could get any better. That's why I haven't changed it in nearly 20 years. Then I heard about a revolutionary new technology, and I knew I had to bring it to you all. My Pillow 2.0 is truly the next generation of My Pillow.
The My Pillow 2.0 is cooler and softer than the last My Pillow. It is so comfortable to sleep on at night. I look forward to going to bed, and I wake up well rested in the morning.
Sleep is all about temperature and height. MyPillow 2.0's patented adjustable fill is going to give you the exact individual support you need from your head to your bed. And now here's where it gets even better. We've all experienced those temperature-related sleep interruptions where you get too hot, you toss and turn, you flip your pillow over to the cool side. Well, all that's gone with my brand new MyPillow 2.0 cooling fabric that's made with temperature-regulating thread.
The best sleep just got even better. Whether you have a MyPillow or not, you need to get the brand new MyPillow 2.0. Call or go to MyPillow.com now. Use your promo code, and for a limited time when you buy one, you'll get a second one absolutely free.
You're sleeping even better.
And cooler, too.
And you're looking good.